Today I'm meeting with Heather Holmgren, and before we talk about what we're going to discuss today, would you please give them your practice and contact information, so if anyone would be inclined to call you, they'll know how to reach you.
Sure. My practice name is Simple Modern Therapy, and you can contact me at 435-730-2973 or email me at simplemoderntherapy@gmail.com.
And you're located in Sugar House.
I am.
Yeah, you're in Utah. Where do you cover? Would you go anywhere? Do people need to come to you, or how does that work?
People would come to my office to see me, and I treat families, couples, and individuals who are struggling with some mental health issues or situational problems.
And I can tell you folks, if you've never been to Heather's office, you're in for a real treat. You'll never come to an office like this ever again. Never before and never again. And she's got some very clever business cards. But that's not what we're going to be talking about, but I want to give you credit because they were very sharp looking cards. I was very impressed. Maybe you can show us one toward the end here. If not, you may have to wait until she actually meets up with you. But what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, today I want to talk about some of the struggles of early single parenting that some early single parenters don't usually think about. And so, first of all, I want to start with, I guess, pointing out, number one, that money's tight and scheduling gets really tricky. And that's maybe not something that surprises people. I think it's the extent to which it influences people that it's surprising.
Oh, there's going to be a change in the scheduling. There's going to be a change in the money situation, but I can manage.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably more serious than they let on.
Definitely. And everybody can be pretty stressed by a divorce situation, and I've seen a lot of parents try to maintain 5 days a week of dancing or baseball practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the kids, and sometimes that's not always the best thing for everybody. It's okay to taper down for a while, to redefine your family situation.
And if you've got that parent going from having been a stay-at-home mom, for example, to working part-time or full-time, it can really be a shock to the system.
Definitely.
Not only moms or dads, but the kids too.
It sure is. It's a very big adjustment. So be easy on yourself.
Are the kids going to be devastated by not going to dance all the time? I mean, Jane loves to dance. I mean, you hear, and I'm not making fun of you, folks who have those. What I'm saying is that you and I see different sides of this,
Mm-hmm.
and we have some insights that maybe they wouldn't because they haven't experienced it. But so if you're telling somebody, maybe it's time to cut back on baseball practices as often, or that dance, or those other activities, what can they expect?
Well, I think that the key word is temporary. That I know that some of these things are extremely important to parents, and they feel like a child's future may be hinged on an involvement in a certain activity, but taking a break isn't going to do permanent damage.
What about parents who think, I've already destabilized my child's life. The last thing I want to do is take away something that's stable, like extracurricular activities, an athletic event or dance or something like that.
That's a really good point, and that's definitely something to consider. I think the problem is if you look at the situation and you're feeling stressed to the max and the kids seem to be struggling, it's something to look at. If it provides consistency, stability, if it fits okay in the schedule, if parents are able to work out whatever the driving situation is, or whatever problems might arise, then fantastic. That's the best case scenario. But if you notice that it's an added problem, maybe it's time to cut back for now.
And they can always rejigger that schedule.
Absolutely.
They can come up, or maybe substitute it. Like it may be that certain activities aren't affordable anymore, or because of a work schedule or something else, or because of the custody sharing schedule, some things have to change.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But it's one of those, I guess, something may be lost, but something's gained that you have to look at.
Yeah.
What other surprises do people have that either they didn't anticipate or they didn't anticipate the impact?
Well, I think a big one is the realization that you don't have anyone to share your struggles or joys with.
And we talked a little bit about that before we sat down, and I thought that was a very astute insight. Tell me about that. So it's the person you can't stand, you're finally free of, actually had some value or may have some lost value. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this person that you can't stand is usually the first person you go to when you say, oh my gosh, Jake said the funniest thing today, or I'm really concerned about Katie's behavior at school. What do you think we should do about it? Lots of times relationship issues are contained between the couple and don't often involve the kids until after the divorce happens or while you're going through a divorce.
It's interesting you should mention that, because I've encountered a situation recently where a friend of mine says, well, I have a problem and I don't want to speak to my parents because of the nature of the thing. I don't want to talk to my siblings. I don't want to talk to my friend because the problem is with my friend. And so she was saying, I can't talk to anybody. And I said, well, then maybe you want to go talk to either our bishop, because he's there for that. And she said, nah, I don't really want to do that. It's kind of embarrassing. I said, all right, well then I guess you could go to a counselor or therapist, because even though you're not really asking for treatment, you need to be able to go to a safe place, a confidential place, just to unburden yourself and maybe get some guidance. And that was like, oh. And a lot of people, myself included, or I should say were, but some people are they're like, I don't want to go to the doctor. That will mean I'm sick. I'll discover there's something wrong with me. I don't want to go to a therapist. I don't want to go to a counselor. I'm afraid I'll find out things are worse than they really are. But that's interesting, like you say, that it's like, I can't really tell you that our son or daughter did something today. I can't really turn to you because you're not just there at home. You were the sounding board that I've gotten used to, and even though I can't stand you, there was that role that's not there. So what can they do?
Well, I think something that a lot of people do that drives other people nuts is they turn to social media. They post pictures of their kids on Facebook, or they Instagram things, or they write things. So I guess when you see those things and they start to drive you nuts, know that maybe it's just a way that someone's reaching out and trying to connect or express something cool that's happened that they may not have someone to talk to about. Telling other people that love the kids, like a teacher or your parents or a really close family member or friend. Those might be people that you would turn to, or you can also start journaling.
Let's talk about journaling briefly, but before we go on to that, I thought, what a great comment is that there are safer places on Facebook than others. If you're just making your own comments on your personal Facebook page, people might get really sick of you, and you don't even realize it. But I can tell you that there are places like a divorced parents forum or Facebook group where that was created exactly for that purpose, is that you can go there and kind of talk about your frustrations, but also share some of your milestones and some of the things that you're happy about. That is really kind of a spouse substitute.
I love that idea, and I guess my only interjection in that is that there are Facebook pages out there or forums that are ex-partner bashing or very negative, which can lead to a lot of other problems.
Yeah, we're not talking about.
So watch out for that, I guess, is all I would say.
I guess I would agree with you, and what I mean is not a place to go and say, that SOB that I was married. It would be a thing like, I'm frustrated and I'm not laying blame. I don't know what to do, or I'm happy and it's not at my ex's expense. Just like you talked about. Hey, you'll never guess what Jake said today. Funny thing. Or I'm concerned about my daughter, and folks, you probably don't want to mention Katie by name, just because it is somewhat public. But yeah, so I agree with you. It's not a place to go online and bash people, but a place where you kind of have a substitute for that spouse that really can't be replaced as well by a parent or a sibling or a best friend. You have to turn to them sometimes, but you're trying to find a place. Now, journaling, tell me about that.
Oh, well, I think journaling it's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit, but it's a really great way to write down the things that happen day to day, or the funny phrases that your child might say, or the struggles you might have. I think it's very valuable for the person to be able to look back and see the path that they're on and how far they've come, and it can be hugely empowering. And also, not to mention, a really great keepsake for your kids as they grow up.
And you'll find funny patterns emerging that you didn't see at the time.
Absolutely, you can therapize yourself.
Yeah, I looked over I don't keep a journal now, I'm ashamed to say, but I did when I was younger and up through college, and it was funny because I was just leafing through it the other day. I was like, wow, I was obsessed with finding a girlfriend for years. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like I was desperate, but all I had on my mind was finding a girlfriend, somebody that was a good fit for me. And I didn't, at the time, I thought, no, I've got classes, I've got a job, but all my journal entries over and over and over and over and over and over talk about the same thing. I may mention that I got an A in a class or something like that, but I couldn't finish without mentioning something about that. And I never knew that. Never saw it until I looked back and said, man, I wouldn't have known that day to day, but it's clear from looking at the page.
That's
really
kind
cool.
Yeah,
well,
fun.
Embarrassing, but it's a good example of an insight. It's like,
it is.
I wouldn't have never seen that from day to day, but I can see it by looking back, having that 30,000 foot view, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
What else do people get surprised by?
Well, I think the next thing would be, lots of times as a person's going through the divorce process, their thoughts will turn to, I'm finally going to be free. I'm going to be able to do all these things that I haven't been able to do. I can't wait to get that person out of my life. And when the kids are sent to the other parent, they don't know what to do with themselves. It's a really strange phenomenon, and I see it happening time and time again. When you're raising children together, there isn't a lot of alone time. And there isn't a lot of time that doesn't revolve around kids, so to not have the kids present is really disorienting for a lot of people.
Just because it's hard to shift from parent to swinging single, so to speak, that idea is like, you think that, but then when the opportunity presents itself, it's like, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and depending on how long you've been a parent, your identity shifts from single person or so-and-so in this professional realm as an employee or whatever to mom or dad. So to lose that identity, even if it's every other weekend or a few times a week, it's strange. You almost have to find yourself again or create an identity that's different.
Yeah, as you're describing that, I was just thinking it's kind of like the Hannah Montana sort of thing, or somebody that's like, I may, what would be an example? Like my stand-up comedian persona that a lot of people see when I'm working, and in this situation, it sounds like you're not really doing something bad. You may actually be doing that to cope better with the situation.
Yeah, definitely, and I think, the classic cases that we would see or would be the most obvious are when people go out and party. They really try on a lot of different hats, try to figure out who they are and how they fit into the world and what they like and what they don't like. And sometimes their way of coping or their way of finding a new identity can look pretty unhealthy and can be pretty unhealthy, but it's not unusual.
I guess kind of like just trying to fill a hole, right? There is a hole. I think there's nothing, my kids aren't around.
What do you do with yourself?
Yeah, I was kind of caught unawares. Well, I know one way to kill an hour is go to the club, or go to the bar, or go do something, or play video games for a long time, or what are some of the destructive things you see people doing other than the obvious things? Like you said, partying, because it's pretty easy. You can, it's anonymous. There's a lot of distractions. I can see that. But what else? What are some of the less obvious things that you see people do? If you can think of those.
Well, I think it would be anything to excess. So working a lot, isolating, staying home and not doing anything, spending all of your time with friends or a friend, overeating, things that don't look like lifestyle balance. Are probably the most destructive things that happen, and some are, as you can see, more hidden, and others are things that we see regularly.
Any tips for people that may not even realize they're kind of sliding into that habit, or what can people do to take a step back or keep themselves from falling into the trap?
Well, it's funny that you should ask, because one of the things that I think is really helpful and people are reluctant to do is to create rules for themselves. If it's something that you say, oh, I'm never going to be one of those moms that go out and party when their kids aren't around, or one of those dads that just works all the time and that's all they care about, then you need to step back and say, well, how am I going to know if I'm going to work too much, or if I'm diving into that too much? How am I going to know? Because I might like a glass of wine every once in a while, or I might like to go to the club and dance with my friends, but how am I going to know if that's too much?
I might like catching up on work when the kids aren't around.
Exactly.
Right.
So it would be creating rules for yourself. Okay, well, if I'm working more than 50 hours a week, or if I find myself thinking about work all the time, or finding ways to stay at work and not go home, maybe that's something I need to look at. Or what does my daily schedule look like, and does it feel balanced? Am I eating regularly? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I doing self-care practices that maybe just involve me, like going to meditate, or going to yoga, or taking a hot bath, or reading a book that I really have looked forward to reading?
If someone came to you and just said, I can see myself having a hard time taking good care of myself, either because my spouse saw to that, or my spouse gave me the reason for it, and now he or she is gone, how could you help somebody with that?
Well, I think, first of all, I would ask the person to look at what is the thing that brings them the most joy. And it might be something that they know right now, or something that they can look back into their past and say, oh, I did that and it made me feel really good and I really liked that. And I would ask them to start there.
Talked to a guy that I thought was interesting, where he was trying to lose weight and couldn't stop going to Olive Garden and having the fettuccine Alfredo, where it turned out that it wasn't so much that it was his favorite food, or that he was just addicted to cheese or pasta, but that he and his wife had their first date at Olive Garden, and he had the fettuccine Alfredo, and he thought, where else can I go to relive or to savor that experience? And if I go out to if I don't go out to dinner with my wife, what am I? Now, so this was a married man, of course, but kind of the same. Do you see where I'm going? Is that I think sometimes people might say, well, I really like partying. In fact, that's part of my life that I didn't get enough partying. That's why I divorced. Can you help people to kind of unravel that and say, well, then why are you so miserable? And maybe we can find out that the partying is a means to an end, but not the only means to an end. Or like helping people to decide they need to get some exercise for their own mental health or their physical health. How could you help someone kind of tease out their motivations?
Well, I guess it would be through that process of really examining everything. What they get out of it that's positive, what they get out of it that's negative, and if it's really giving them what they need. So we would look at all these things, but first and foremost, the person that I'm meeting with has to be open to the idea that it could potentially be something they need to add to their life, or take away from, or minimize in some way. There's no way that I can talk someone into recognizing that something's a problem.
I'm glad you make that distinction. But you're educated and experienced and skilled in helping people to be more comfortable, or perhaps not even realizing that's what's going on. Wouldn't you say that's a lot of what a person in your position can do? Is make somebody, you're not tricking them, but you're simply putting them at ease and going through a process without it being, lie down on this couch and tell me about your mother. It can be a situation where they're not having to just confront all of their insecurities and fears with just blunt questions like, so, why are you here? And would that be fair? I mean, it's you have a way of making people feel that they're not threatened. You can maybe ask them some pointed questions, but do so over the course of a session where they're not so self-conscious?
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of elaborate on that? Or?
Sure. I believe that therapy should be a collaborative process first and foremost. If you don't like your therapist or you don't like the approach, therapy probably isn't going to work for you. So it definitely should be a place where you can come and feel comfortable and feel like you're not being judged, that you can talk about some of those things that maybe you don't want to tell other people that's happening, or something that you've done that you're not proud of. This should be that space where you feel comfortable to do that. And my goal is always to help the other person be the happiest that they can possibly be. And that can look however they want it to look. But that is always my goal for therapy.
Do you give them, do you base that on some bedrock principles though? Can somebody say, thank you so much. Now I understand that heroin is my path to happiness. Are there certain things that you would say, no, there's a few things that are universal to everybody, or is that not true? I don't know the answer.
Well, I do think that there's some things that are universally true and some things that are unethical for me to support just based on my licensure and my professional position. I would never support someone engaging in a behavior that could potentially and detrimentally harm their health or cause death or cause the harm of another person. That's not anything that I would ever support.
Are there other things that are not so drastic? I was exaggerating to make a point, but are there some things that, like what if somebody says what if they say, I just love to lose myself in good books, and so I will do nothing but read. I'll go on like a reading binge for weeks on end, and then I get it out of. Would that concern you, or am I just being a fuss budget?
I think it would definitely pique my interest. Ultimately, people get to make the choices that they want to make when they leave my office, and if they don't feel like something's a problem, I feel like it's a waste of their money and their time, and my time as well, to try to convince them otherwise. I'm going to be curious about it. I will ask them about it. I will talk to them about what my perspective might be, but I'm not going to spend all my time on it if they're not willing to do that either. There might be something else besides the reading.
There's a lot more in what you say there than meets the eye. Just as I hear you saying that, that's interesting. Are there other things that people need to be aware of that may be a bigger surprise or a bigger shock to them than they might originally think when they go to single parenthood?
Well, there's just a couple more things that I want to mention. One of those is loss of control over what's happening at the other parent's house. Like I had said before, lots of times when people are going through the divorce process, they think, oh, I can't wait to get rid of this person and I can do whatever I want. And that's true, you can. And you can do those things with your kids when they're at your house. But once they leave, that's
out of your hands.
Exactly. And obviously there's some exceptions to that, like if you suspect child abuse is going on, or there's some other harm that you believe may be coming to your child. But overall...
The abuse could be neglect.
Exactly.
Kids aren't getting bathed. The kids aren't being fed.
Right.
Things like that.
Right. But kids not being bathed every other day on a consistent basis probably isn't grounds for you
even
to
if
interject.
You think that bathing daily is important, yeah.
Yeah, and these are things that really get people upset. Kids coming home saying colorful words, or being able to watch shows that you'd never let them watch when you were together as a couple.
Big thing is the R movies. Regardless of one's religious background, there's oftentimes parents that would say, well, I don't think that's appropriate for our kids under the age of 17.
Right.
And others are like, oh yeah, but I'm there, and I explain to them, and this is really good. It won an Oscar, and that can be a real conflict because, like you say, the kids may be affected by that in one home, and they're not affected by it in the other, at least directly. What do you do?
As a parent, there's nothing you can do. And the sooner you can learn that, the better off you're going to be, and the better off the kids are going to be, really. Because what's more detrimental to a kid in the long run? Being exposed to a rated R movie, I hate to say it, or the constant conflict of their parents.
Well, let me give you an example. As soon as I turned 17, I couldn't wait to see my first rated R movie. Not because I just wanted to go have a rated R movie experience, but because I had the impression that, man, all the good movies are R. Whether it would be they were packed with action, or because they were better made, or had better actors, or whatever, there's better storylines or something like that. And so I watched a bunch of rated R movies, and then when I had my own kids, I remember my parents would go see rated R movies and come home and tell me all about it and say, when can I go see it?
Mm-hmm.
Never. You know what I mean? And so what I decided to do was I just said, I won't see rated R movies because, frankly, it's probably not going to do me any harm not to. But for me, it was so I can consistently tell my kids, the reason you do not get to see this movie is because I do not get to see that movie. And I thought my kids should understand that much more easily than saying, I'm an adult, you're a child, I can handle it, you can't. Because I remember as a little kid just thinking, I can tell you, when that day comes, I'm going to go see the rated R movies my parents got to see and I never got to see, and all that sort of thing.
Huh.
So the reason I give that as an example is, what if you can't come up with some shared rules across both parents' homes, like bedtimes and grooming or hygiene, and what would you tell somebody generally? I know each situation is different, but how do you help somebody who deals with that? It's like, I think the kids are being exposed to immoral material, not illegally. Mm-hmm. I think the kids are not being given a good moral example, or a good good work ethic, or whatever the situation is, and I can see it changing them for the worse. Are they changing for the worse?
Depends on who you ask.
Right, so let's eliminate child abuse and neglect. Mm-hmm. But you do feel like the kids are not as good as they were. Their character has worsened. Mm-hmm. And you can, if you're being honest with yourself as a parent, it's like one of the parents is a flake. One of the parents is too permissive. Mm-hmm. So take the ball and run with that for a moment, would you?
Too bad that you married them and had kids with them in the first place. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to, and I know that's really harsh and in your face, but you made a decision to get divorced. Divorce, even in the beginning, hurts kids, and it's hard for them. They're going to be different no matter what. Being exposed to that person that you married and who they are, all their flaws and all of their strengths, is going to affect your kids. Being exposed to you and the hard times that you're going through and the things that affect you on a day-to-day basis are going to affect your kids. You can control what you can control. If you feel like things are happening that are way beyond what you think is good for your kids, I guess that's a time to evaluate custody, to talk to a lawyer. And sometimes the fight is more harmful in the long run. So that's when you do something that looks like therapy or is therapy, where you go and you talk about what can I do to optimize the time that I have with my kids, to express to them what I feel is important, to instill values in them. And the truth is that when they become an adult, hopefully in that adult stage, they can look back and say, what can I take from my childhood that I feel like was good for me? What can I leave, and how can I become a healthy, productive adult?
If you're the more responsible parent, in some ways you're dealing with a disability, aren't you?
What do you mean by that?
You've had some of your power for good, through no fault of your own, curtailed or weakened. It'd be like going blind in one eye. It's like, I didn't do anything to deserve this, but I have to. My children, if they were left to me, if I got to call all the shots about their upbringing, they'd be better off. If you're honest with yourself, yeah, I'm better. I'm a better disciplinarian. I'm a better teacher. I'm a better example. Mm-hmm. And now I've been disabled. I'm partially disabled. Somebody who's partially disabled can either stew about it and lament it the rest of their life, or they can adapt and try to say, I'm going to make the best of this. Just because something has changed doesn't mean I can't have a happy life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and isn't that what life's all about? Is taking the things that happen that either are a result of your choices or are acts of nature or God or whatever you want to call it, and roll with it.
Yeah.
Do the very best that you can, and that's the best possible approach to maintaining your sanity and your mental health in a divorce situation.
And can you help people to see what best is under various circumstances?
Yeah.
Give them some idea. That's
Definitely.
good.
Definitely.
There's one more surprise, is that correct? Or are there two?
Yes.
One
no,
more
there's just one more, and that last one is recognizing that kids sometimes regress or they start to display new behavior problems. And that's a really natural response to a big transition or living in a high conflict, unstable situation. Your child might want to sleep with their blanket again that they haven't had for years, or they might start wetting the bed. And to be able to look at those and recognize this is not the fault of the child. It's okay for them to have their blanket or their binky or whatever toy comforting object they have, at least for the time being, to not lecture them or get upset if they start wetting the bed again. And if those new behavior problems show up, to take them to a safe place like therapy, to encourage them to discuss problems with other people that they trust.
At what age do children not regress or not regress much?
I don't think that there's an age. If my memory serves me correctly, the younger the child is, the more difficult it can, a big transition like this can be on them, where you'd think, oh, you know, we just have a toddler and they won't know any different. That's not necessarily the case. I think that as children become more independent and autonomous, you see less of those regressive behaviors, but even as a teenager you might see enhanced rebellion or behaviors that are classic to teenagers be magnified in some ways.
And if you're getting divorced just as they're hitting their teenage years, you don't know how rebellious they would have otherwise been, or how much they're being affected by it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And God
Once
help
again,
you.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I mean, so even you might have a toddler, you might have a tiny child, and think, well, this is a shame, but in a sense, some people might be relieved, saying, oh, this child will have plenty of time to grow into this role of having divorced parents. But you're saying, even though they may not consciously be able to put their finger on it, these children can sense the change subconsciously, and they will react without coming out and saying, Mom, I want my binky or my blanket, or I'm wetting the bed, because this is a reaction, and we as parents may just see it as, what, just kids being irritating or kids being sick? You know what I mean? Or like dysfunctional?
Yeah, all of those things. Why are they doing this when they haven't done that for a really long time? Or this is a new thing that's come up, or they are sick a lot. And if you think about it, young kids don't have that communicative tool that older kids have. They don't have the ability to emotionally express themselves.
It's my ex molesting my child, right?
Geez.
That's why there's the bedwetting and all that kind of stuff. Is that a thing you see?
I do see sometimes people come in with concerns about their kids that they are absolutely sure is a result of what's happening at the other parent's house. And that comes back down to what can you control, what can't you control, how real is this? That can get really, really sticky.
But what do they do? What do you do in those situations? Do you just help them to kind of not see through it, but work their way through it, or try to see if there's paranoia at work there or something like that, or what would you say? Because I'm going to tell you, as a divorce attorney, people will come to me saying, hey, ever since we've separated, my kids are behaving in strange ways, and it doesn't happen to every client, but it's because of my estranged spouse. I think that there's something evil going on over there, and it's like, well, there could be, but I mean, and I'm not a therapist, so I can't. I was like, maybe it's just kids dealing with their parents' strained marriage, the acrimony, and the physical separation of, you know, parents from children. They're kind of, no, yeah, he lets them watch our movies. Like, well, as long as he's not, you know, showing them 9.5 weeks and some of these other, I mean, is he really showing it to them, or is he watching it at night and they happen to pass by as they're on their way to their bedroom or brush their teeth? And so, can you help people see more clearly, or is that beyond, I mean, is that something that, can you help them do that, or can you not help them do that, or what can you do to, when they kind of start to see boogeymen behind every tree?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess you can recognize that it's a natural human reaction to jump to conclusions. That sometimes when we get a little cough, we think that we've got the flu. Or, you know, things like that. These small things happen, we automatically think that it means this big thing about ourselves. So I start by just illuminating that concept and looking at how that kind of thinking may be at play. Examining beliefs that a person has based on the things that are happening and how that affects the outcome. And also teaching them some really good parenting skills, like working with their child on emotional expression, disengaging from parent shopping behavior or attitudes that kids might bring home from school or from the other parents'
And
house.
I would think you can also help parents to recognize it happening if they're being played so well, like the parent shopping. Some
Yeah.
parents know they're being played, other parents don't,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be a helpful thing that a therapist could help that sort of parent with. Whether you're the one that's being played or the other parent is being played, and you don't want that to happen, and that sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, point of this is to let you know that if you're resistant to the idea of counseling or therapy, you may not need it, or you may not need much, but you'd be doing yourself and your children a disservice if you see a problem and you feel it slipping away from you. Therapy or counseling could be a big help. That is not something I always believed myself, and so I'm glad that I came to that conclusion, because I've tried it the other way. And so it's nice to see, and you know what? Not everyone's going to have Heather's opinions. Not everyone's going to see it the same way. I would say that you're probably the first to admit you don't have all the answers.
I don't think I'm the first, but I like to
What I
think
mean-
I'm one of the people.
No, you'd be the first to say about yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't have all the answers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so the point is that I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you found this enlightening. And so for those that would like to talk to you more, would you just one more time give your full name, your practice, and your contact information if anyone would like to reach you.
Definitely. My name is Heather Holmgren. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. My business name is Simple Modern Therapy. And if you would like to make an appointment or reach out to me, my number is 435-730-2973, or you can email me at simplemoderntherapy.com. And again, my office is here in Sugar House.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.